There used to be a neighborhood on the edge of Baytown, Texas, called Brownwood. It was one of the most desirable addresses in the Houston area. Doctors, executives, refinery managers, they built handsome ranch houses on a wooded peninsula reaching out into Galveston Bay, with water views on 3 sides. If you drive to that peninsula today, the streets are still there. You can walk them. But the houses are gone, and in places, the pavement runs straight into the water and disappears beneath it. Brownwood did not burn down. It was not bulldozed for a freeway. The ground it stood on sank more than 10 feet until a neighborhood that had been built comfortably above the bay was sitting below it, waiting for the storm that would finish it off. In 1983, that storm arrived. What happened to Brownwood was not a freak of nature. It was measured, documented, predicted, and explained decades before the water came. And here is the part that should stop you cold. The same force that pulled Brownwood under is still working on the Houston region right now. In 2025, researchers writing in the journal Nature Cities measured land motion across America's biggest cities down to the millimeter, and they reached a verdict. Houston is the fastest sinking major city in the United States. More than 40% of its land is dropping measurably every single year. And the fastest sinking ground in the entire region isn't some forgotten industrial zone. It's sitting under brand new master-planned suburbs where families are moving in right now, next to fountains and man-made lakes, with no idea what the sensors down the road are recording. So this is the story of a city that has been sinking for 100 years. A city that discovered why. A city that built the first agency in American history specifically to stop it. And in one half of the region, actually succeeded. And a city that is still, today, sinking faster than any of its peers. Both of those things are true at the same time. How can that be? To understand it, you have to understand what Houston is built on and what Houston did to it. Houston sits on the Gulf Coastal Plain, and the ground beneath it is not rock. It is thousands of feet of soft, layered sediment, sand, silt, and clay, laid down over millions of years by rivers draining toward the Gulf. Locked inside those layers are enormous natural reservoirs of fresh water, the Chico and Evangeline aquifers, and below them, the Jasper. For a young, booming city with no mountains and no great river, those aquifers looked like a miracle. Clean water, right underfoot, essentially free. All you had to do was drill. And Houston drilled. The first groundwater measurements in the area date back to the 1890s. The first land elevation survey came in 1905 and 1906, and that survey matters because it gave scientists a baseline. It froze the original height of the land in the record books. Nobody knew it yet, but they had just taken the before photograph in one of the largest before and after comparisons in American engineering history. Here is the mechanism, and it's worth 30 seconds, because everything else in this story depends on it. Those clay layers underground are like a sponge. The water inside them isn't just sitting in open caverns. It's held in the pore spaces between fine grains, and the pressure of that water actually helps hold the ground up. Pump the water out faster than rain can refill it, and the pressure drops. The clay compresses. The grains pack tighter. And the land surface above, with everything built on it, settles downward. Engineers call it subsidence. And it comes with a catch that makes it different from almost every other infrastructure problem in this series. When clay compacts, it does not spring back. Refill the aquifer and the ground does not rise again. Every foot Houston loses is lost forever. Through the early decades, the sinking was slow, scattered, easy to ignore. Then came the boom. World War II turned the Houston Ship Channel into one of the great industrial corridors on Earth. Refineries, chemical plants, steel, and every one of those facilities was thirsty. From the late 1940s through the mid-1970s, the region pumped groundwater on a scale it had never attempted, and the ground responded on a scale nobody was prepared for. Along the ship channel between Houston and Baytown, the land dropped more than 2 meters, over 6.5 feet. By 1979, parts of the Baytown area had sunk roughly 10 feet from where the 1906 surveyors had measured it. An area of more than 8,000 square kilometers, larger than some states' entire metro regions, had lost at least a foot of elevation. In some places, you could see it with your own eyes. Wellheads and monument foundations standing proud of ground that had settled away beneath them, like posts left behind by a falling tide. Which brings us back to Brownwood, because Brownwood was the place where the abstraction became a death sentence. The neighborhood had been built in the late 1930s at around 10 feet above sea level. That margin should have protected it for a century. Instead, the industrial pumping directly around Baytown consumed it, foot by foot, in a single generation. By the 1970s, high tides were coming up through the storm drains. Ordinary rainstorms turned streets into canals. Residents jacked their houses up on pilings and kept living there because it was their home and because, on paper, the property was still worth something. Then, in August 1983, Hurricane Alicia pushed the bay across the entire peninsula. The neighborhood was destroyed, and this time there was no rebuilding, because you cannot rebuild your way out of ground that no longer exists above the waterline. The city condemned it. Today, the Brownwood Peninsula is the Baytown Nature Center, a wetland preserve with herons wading through what used to be living rooms. It is one of the only places in America where you can hike through a drowned suburb. Now, here's where this story refuses to follow the script you might expect. Because in most of these documentaries, this is the point where officials ignore the warnings and the disaster just keeps rolling. That is not what happened in Houston. What happened next was, by the standards of American infrastructure, astonishing. Texas acted. In 1975, before Brownwood was even finished dying, the Texas legislature created the Harris-Galveston Subsidence District. It was the first government agency in the history of the United States created specifically to stop the ground from sinking. And it was given a power that in Texas, of all places, was almost unthinkable: the authority to regulate how much groundwater private wells could pump. Not suggest, regulate. The logic was brutally simple. The science, built on decades of U.S. Geological Survey measurement, said groundwater withdrawal was the engine of the collapse. So the district's job was to force the coastal, hardest-hit parts of the region off the aquifers entirely and onto surface water. Water from rivers and man-made reservoirs like Lake Livingston and Lake Houston, which you can drink without deflating the ground beneath your feet. And it worked. Hold on to that, because it is the hinge of this entire story. Once the city of Houston converted the ship channel industries and the southeastern communities to surface water from Lake Livingston, the subsidence there didn't just slow, it essentially stopped. The area around Baytown and Pasadena, which had been dropping faster than almost anywhere in America, flattened out. Today, the coastal zone of the district is allowed to draw only about 10% of its water from the ground and typically uses even less. The district's own leadership points to areas that historically sank 10 feet, where the sinking has now been brought to a halt. Groundwater pressure in those aquifers has been recovering for decades. By the numbers, the Harris-Galveston Subsidence District is one of the most successful environmental interventions any American region has ever carried out. Fort Bend County was so convinced that it created its own subsidence district in 1989. So the problem was solved. The agency existed, the science was proven, the fix demonstrably worked. And yet, the 2025 study still crowned Houston the fastest sinking major city in America. If the fix worked, why is the city still sinking? The answer is the dark heart of this story, and it has less to do with geology than with money, growth, and the shape of the map. Because the sinking didn't stop. It moved. While the coast was being rescued, Greater Houston was exploding, adding millions of people, pushing relentlessly north and west, out toward Katy, Cypress, Jersey Village, the Woodlands. And every one of those new communities needed water. Surface water is expensive. You have to build treatment plants and pump it through giant pipelines across a metro area the size of a small country. Groundwater is cheap. You drill a well into the same aquifers that swallowed Brownwood, and you pump. The regulatory deadlines for converting those inland areas to surface water were set decades into the future, precisely because the pipes didn't exist yet. So for 30 years, the boom on Houston's northern and western frontier ran on the aquifers, and the bowl of sinking land, which had been centered on the coast, migrated inland, following the drills like a shadow. The measurements tell the story with uncomfortable precision. By the early 2020s, thanks to the coastal conversion, the area sinking faster than 1 centimeter per year had shrunk to about 1,500 square kilometers, 1/20th of the region. Genuine progress. But look at where that remaining zone sits. A belt across northern and western Harris County, southern Montgomery County, and northern Fort Bend County, Jersey Village, the Woodlands, and above all, Katy, where instruments have recorded the fastest sinking in the entire region, roughly 3 centimeters a year, every year since 2020. That's more than an inch annually. Over a 30-year mortgage, that is the better part of 3 feet. And it is exactly there, on the fastest sinking ground in metropolitan Houston, that some of the region's newest master-planned communities have risen. West of Houston, between Katy and Fulls here, the community of Tamaron sells the full suburban dream. Lakes, fountains, resort pools, thousands of new homes. A monitoring sensor nearby records the ground dropping more than 3 centimeters per year. The water filling those decorative lakes and keeping those lawns green is drawn, in large part, from the same underground layers whose collapse is lowering the neighborhood, a detail that appears in no sales brochure. The families moving in are not being reckless. They simply have no way to know. Subsidence is the rare disaster you cannot see from your front porch, because your house, your street, and your entire horizon are all going down together. But you do eventually feel it. And this is where the second act of Houston's sinking gets expensive. The ground does not drop evenly. It drops in patches, fastest where pumping is heaviest, and that differential motion is a slow-motion wrecking ball. It cracks foundations and pavement. It strains buried water mains, sewer lines, and pipelines until they reach the limit of their flexibility and fail. It can even reactivate the region's network of shallow geologic faults, sending step-like ridges creeping through subdivisions, splitting slabs as they go. And most dangerous of all, in a city defined by flooding, uneven sinking warps the drainage of the entire landscape. It creates bowls where water gathers and flattens the gradient of the bayous that are supposed to carry storms away. Land that was mapped above the floodplain when it was built can settle toward it and into it. Houston learned during Hurricane Harvey in 2017 what happens when water has nowhere to go, and every year of continued subsidence quietly redraws the flood map in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, the official maps struggle to keep pace. The federal government's updated flood mapping for Harris County has been repeatedly delayed. Homeowners are making the biggest financial decision of their lives using elevation data that, in the fastest sinking areas, is already out of date. There is one more number from the science that deserves a moment of silence, because it reframes the entire century. Researchers at the Subsidence District and the University of Houston tallied up the total damage from 1906 to 2024. Significant sinking, a foot or more, now covers roughly 12,000 square kilometers, essentially all of Harris and Galveston counties and beyond. And all that compacted clay represents storage. The aquifers have permanently lost about 12 cubic kilometers of it. That is 60 times the volume of Lake Houston. It is roughly 8 years of total water consumption for Harris and Galveston counties, capacity that existed under Texas a century ago and can never be refilled. In a state that lurches between flood and drought, Houston spent its emergency reserve to get cheap water in the boom years, and there is no putting it back. During the drought of 2011 to 2013, when Lake Houston shrank until you could nearly walk across stretches of it, the region got a preview of what it means to face a dry decade with a diminished bank account. So who, exactly, failed to fix this? It would be convenient to point at a single villain, but the honest answer is more unsettling. The system is behaving exactly as it was designed to. The Harris-Galveston Subsidence District set a schedule for weaning the west and north off groundwater, 30% surface water by 2010, 60% by 2025, 80% by 2035. The deadlines were set a generation out because the infrastructure to meet them had to be built from nothing. That infrastructure is the West Harris County Surface Water Project, more than 60 miles of transmission pipeline in segments up to 96 inches across, pipes big enough to stand in, carrying treated water from Lake Houston out to the sinking frontier at a cost of roughly $1.2 billion. And who pays for it? Not the developers who built on the cheap groundwater, the residents. The cost lands on households across the western districts through fees on their water bills, a $1 billion invoice for a century of pumping, delivered to the people who arrived last. The mandate demanded 60% conversion by 2025. The pipeline bringing the water wasn't scheduled to flow until mid-2026. Even when the fix is funded and under construction, the ground doesn't wait. And just beyond the district's northern boundary, the story takes its most frustrating turn of all. Montgomery County, home to the Woodlands and some of the fastest sinking ground in the region, is not governed by a subsidence district at all. It's governed by a groundwater conservation district with different priorities. In recent years, that district has moved to expand groundwater pumping, and its own planning documents have contemplated withdrawal rates several times faster than the aquifer naturally refills. Critics, including flood control advocates in the neighboring counties, have accused it of treating subsidence as a public relations problem rather than a physical one. Whatever the intent, the physics doesn't negotiate. Water pumped in Montgomery County drops pressure in the same connected aquifer system, and southern Montgomery County is now sinking at some of the fastest rates anywhere in Greater Houston. One county spent 50 years and $1 billion learning the lesson of Brownwood. The county next door is still running the original experiment. Step back, and you can see the full shape of it. Houston is not a city that ignored its sinking problem. It is the city that understood it first, measured it best, regulated it earliest, and proved, on its own coastline, that it could be stopped. The Harris-Galveston subsidence district is studied around the world. And yet, in 2025, the satellites still found Houston dropping faster than any major city in America, with the newest neighborhoods sitting on the fastest falling ground. Both things are true, and they are true for the same reason. For 100 years, Greater Houston has grown faster than its fixes. Every time the region caught up with the sinking in one place, the boom moved somewhere cheaper and started pumping again. The problem was never really the clay, or even the wells. It was the arithmetic of a metropolis that adds the population of a whole new city every decade and always finds the cheapest water first. The pipeline to the west is coming. The deadlines tighten to 80% by 2035. If history holds, the Katy belt will one day flatten out the way Baytown did, and the engineers will chalk up another hard-won victory. The question is what the region will have permanently lost by then, in elevation, in flood margin, in aquifer storage that took 10,000 years to fill and 1 century to spend. Brownwood's residents also believed they had time. The measurements said otherwise, and the measurements won. Somewhere west of Houston tonight, a family is watering a new lawn above the fastest sinking ground in America, and the sensor down the road is quietly adding another millimeter to the ledger. So here's the question worth sitting with. When a city proves it knows how to stop the ground from falling and keeps growing onto ground that's still falling anyway, is that a problem of engineering or a choice? And if you lived there, would you know?